help me understand T&M contracts. Oh, I do contracts. This is fun. I get that some scopes of work, whether in design or construction, are a bit more liquid, so it makes sense that you get an initial expectation of what to be completed with a specified amount of effort. But who's stopping the contractor or consultant from BSing everything and saying this work ended up taking us 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks? Does a typical T&M contract make it obligatory to at least meet some minimum goal, or is it the discretion of the contractor or consultant to be honest about the time and material they use? Yeah, so I mean, some of it's an integrity thing. Another thing you can do is it's project controls, right? So if you're out on a site, you can use time sheets and time cards and badging in to track the time. And for materials, you can require your consultants, your contractors to provide batch tickets or receiving tickets for the material that they've used so that way they support their invoices with the time in their timesheets and badge data and the material that they used. That's kind of the project controls aspect of managing your contractor. That if you're on a T&M contract, then you really kind of have to manage your contractor. There's other controls you can put in place, like you can put a not to exceed cap. As a contractor and consultant, I hate T&M NTE. It's kind of like the worst of both worlds. All the reporting requirements of T&M, but the hard cap on the top, like a lump sum contract. So, and also you can't really bury extra contingencies into as easily, especially if you rate sheets on file with a client. For a T&M NTE versus a lump sum, I could just build, an extra 10% of just straight cash contingency. But for a T&M NTE, I can't really do that unless I do it in the hours, but then I don't get the benefit of it anyways because if I don't use all those hours, I don't get all that revenue. So T&M contracts, the way you manage that is you have robust project controls as the client, so you have an awareness of what your contractors are spending. You have them invoicing you frequently enough and providing reporting of their hours frequently enough so you can understand how they're trending. And if they're starting to spike up really quickly on hours and it doesn't make sense with what you're doing, you can say, hey, stop, what are you doing? Why are you spending all this money? It's like, oh, well, somebody on your team told me to do this. And okay, I didn't authorize that. I think the other thing about that is that you put really strict controls in your contract. You say, hey, the way you control a T&M contract is you define your scope, very more clearly defined scope on both ends from the client and the contractor means that there's less likelihood that there's going to be out of scope work done by the contractor, so they're less likely to overrun. And also, if they're doing out of scope work and you have a contract that defines it and they weren't instructed to do that out of scope work, then as the client, then you can have an argument to them saying, hey, I didn't authorize this, it wasn't in your scope, you're going to have to eat those costs. So those are the biggest ways that you as a client can manage a T&M contract is having a contract that has well-defined scopes and well-defined requirements as to who can authorize changes in scope by having a robust project controls requirements of your contractors for them to report to you and uh, invoicing frequently enough so you understand where their costs are trending and what they're working on and building up those costs. And then also actual physical controls of timesheet data and batch tickets and material receipt tickets to control those costs as they come in and hit your project. T&M contracts are really good if you have kind of a more long-standing relationship, especially the consultant is they're not going to be they're not going to want to risk jeopardizing your relationship as your client. They don't want to lose your business, right? So they're even more incentivized to not behave poorly in a T&M arrangement and take advantage of that. This really makes a lot of sense whenever you don't have a very defined scope and maybe you're just, especially T&M, not to exceed. You can say, hey, I have a bucket of cash and we're trying to work towards this thing. Don't overrun the bucket of cash as you're approaching the maximum amount of the bucket of cash. Let me know. And we'll just make some progress on this thing, T&M relationship. We have a rate schedule on file, so we know how much it's going to cost approximately, and we know generally what we're going to accomplish, but we don't have to get a very specific thing done that our scope isn't very defined. That's another really good time to use T&M, a T&M contract. So anyways, that's a big rambly answer on my end about T&M contracts, but in general, again, time and materials, T&M, reimbursable, good for undefined scopes, established relationships, uh, robust project controls, and management. That's whenever a T&M not to exceed makes, or T&M makes a lot of sense, and then you can add the not to exceed cap whenever you're worried about overrunning, especially if you're an owner that has some swag in the conversation. I'll tell you this: if I'm your contractor, I will fight very hard against against any not to exceed cap if we're negotiating a rate arrangement. But that's just me. All right. Anyways, that's T&M contracts. If I missed anything, people let me know. But that is what I do. I spend a lot of time in contracts, T&M contracts being one type of them. All right.
Never losing focus because I ain't chasing payments. Still playing in the basement while I'm working on arrangements. They heard the kid in 50 countries, thank God that's amazing. But I'd rather thank Spotify, they put me on the station.